elements must exist in order to describe something in the game. Professor Akram here, and in this lesson we will explore these elements and other key terminology used in game development. It is important for game designers to be able to identify a game as a whole system of the individual elements. In general, we divide game elements into two categories, formal elements and dramatic elements. We will explore each of the elements in depth in later lessons, but for right now we are simply going to review what these elements are. Formal elements are elements that provide basic game mechanics. Without these elements, the game would not function and be ultimately unplayable. Formal elements include players, individuals playing the game, objectives or goals, what the player must strive to accomplish, procedures, steps to playing the game, rules, what the players can and cannot do, resources, game assets that aid the player, conflict, the obstacles which the player encounters, boundaries, the limitations to what the player can do, outcomes, a winner, loser, or draw. The dramatic elements of games are what engages the players emotionally and keeps the players invested in playing the game. These elements include challenge, which creates tension for the player, play, the ability for the player to play, mess about within the game system, bending the rules, so to speak, premise, the concept behind the game's story. Some games only have a premise. Story takes the premise further, enriching the game experience. Characters provide players with a way to empathize with the story, and style is the look and feel of the game. Game systems are a set of interacting or interdependent elements forming the working game. These elements work with this closed system, engaging the player in structured conflict and resolves its uncertainty in an unequal outcome. When thinking about the elements of the game, remember that games are given structure by their formal elements and emotionally engage the player by their dramatic elements. There are a few other requirements in games that do not specifically fall into the formal and dramatic elements list. These are not individual items inside the game, but rather subsystems that work inside of the game. Gameplay consists of all player experiences, primarily the challenges, choices, and consequences that the players face within the game. Game mechanics are defined as the construct of all formal elements, predominantly the rules and procedures intended to produce enjoyable gameplay. Feedback is the positive or negative response to the player's choices or actions. Risk is the chance of losing for greater gain, while reward is the positive feedback for overcoming challenge. Balance refers to the perception that the game is consistent, fair, and fun. There are a few other terms that every game designer should be familiar with. These terms are used to describe certain elements or behaviors of games. Game theory is the study of participants' behaviors in strategic situations. Gamification is the use of game design elements in non-game contexts to encourage engagement and productivity. Core mechanics is the repetitive game action that the players perform within the game to achieve a goal. For example, the main action of a game may be to duck and jump to avoid obstacles and navigate through the game. The magic circle is a temporary world in which the game takes place. This is where pretend comes into games, and the player must be willing to pretend, or in other words, buy into the rules of the game. The first use of the term magic circle was by Dutch historian Johan Huizinga in his 1938 book Homo Ludens, a study of play elements in culture. This is one of the most noteworthy texts in game psychology, as it discusses the importance of play in culture and society. Are puzzles games? Well, not exactly. A puzzle is defined as a toy or other contraption designed to amuse the player by presenting difficulties to be solved by skill or patient effort. Key aspects of puzzles are that they are fun and that there is a right answer. For puzzles to be fun, they should have a form of play, meaning you can mess about with the puzzle. It should be tricky, but not too hard or too easy. In other words, it should eventually be solvable. Play is taking part in an enjoyable activity for the sake of amusement. These activities can vary, however, veteran game designer and author Chris Crawford defines 4 types of play activities. Stories involve fantasy play and cannot be manipulated by the player. There is no interaction. Toys are manipulable, but there is no fixed goal. Puzzles are rule-based systems, but the goal is to find the solution, not to beat an opponent. And unlike games, puzzles have little replay value. Lastly, there are games, which are rule-based systems in which the goal is for one player to win. They involve opposing players who acknowledge and respond to one another's action. The difference between games and puzzles has little to do with the mechanics. We can easily turn mini puzzles and athletic challenges into games and vice versa. Game designers should be able to speak the lingo of the industry. They need to be able to understand how games are a system, the elements of the system, and the basic terminology used for describing certain aspects of the system. I hope you found this lesson informative. And don't forget to check out other lessons and tutorials on the channel. So what are you waiting for? Get creative today.